Hi again, everybody. Mr. Drummond coming to you. Sorry. I should have turned my phone off. All right. Coming to you on Tuesday, April 7th, I think it is. As you can tell by my beard and my scraggy hair that we've entered another week of quarantine. The school district gave you guys an assignment for the shortened week, and then next week is spring break, which we won't have any formal assignments for. But then we're getting ginned up for giving you guys some new assignments when we come back the week after spring break. And I figured I'd just keep posting stuff so that it was up here and accessible for you whenever you came across it. Working on some new assignments for you guys to keep you engaged throughout this, okay? And it's going to be a lot of review. We don't want to introduce any crazily new concepts. We have gotten through, believe it or not, most of the content that we were planning on getting through. Obviously, we wanted to reinforce that. We were going to be reviewing for our state test, which now wasn't going to happen. But we had made a lot of progress in class. And then in this last week, talking about the Ohio Constitution and the government and the economy, we covered the last two big topics that we needed to cover. So what we're going to be doing for the rest of our time together, whether it's in person someday or whether it continues to be online, is we're going to be reviewing some big key concepts from class, okay? Since we don't have new stuff to go over, I thought we'd start, we'll take advantage of the opportunity to kind of get into and revisit a couple of the big ideas. So we're going to be talking about some of those basic building blocks of our Constitution and our entire system of government. We're going to be talking about Federalist and Anti-Federalist. How did we write this Constitution? What were the compromises that were made? How did we hammer out this document? We're going to talk more about the Bill of Rights. We'll talk more about the structure of the government. Okay, we'll kind of go back over a few of these things, and we'll have a good opportunity to talk about some stuff that maybe we weren't able to focus on because we were so busy trying to get to new stuff. So we'll do some review, and we'll just try to keep this conversation going. All right. As always, no matter who's watching this, whether you're my student or whether you've come across this some other way, through Facebook or whatever, I'm Mr. Drummond. My email is John, JOHN, .Drummond, DRUMMOND, at youngstown.k12.oh.us. And you can reach me at any time with that. I check it constantly throughout the day. Any questions, any comments, any concerns, problems you're having, anything. If you just want to check in, say, hey, whatever. I'd be happy to hear from anybody. So I thought what we'd do today, just kind of quickly go back over those 5, with a couple of kind of attached ones, but the 5 big main principles of our constitutional system of government. What makes American government American government? What if you stripped away everything else? What are the bare bones? You can't have American government without these principles or these ideas. Okay, and if you can look into the Constitution, you can find examples of these principles being carried out. Okay, so we talked about them earlier in the year, but we're just going to kind of quickly review them. I thought I'd make a little video, and then we'll have assignments starting after spring break that touch on these, and you can revisit this video, watch it, rewind it, fast forward some stuff, whatever you want. Okay, so 5, and then we'll tack on kind of one other one that's very important. But in times like this where we're kind of in crisis, let's get back to the basics. Okay, so at the heart of American democracy, of our democratic republic, right? What are the key building blocks of that? Well, the first thing, the most important thing, is that who's in charge? Hopefully you said the people, right? The people are in charge. The people have power, right? And we call that popular sovereignty, right? And I wrote it down here for you, okay? Right there. Popular sovereignty, R-E-I-G-N, right in the middle. That reign, right? That's what kings and queens are said to do. They reign over their countries. So what does that mean? Popular, people, sovereignty, power, people power, okay? How do we show that in the United States? How do you get to be in charge of anything in the United States? For the most part, you've got to get elected, right? We vote. If you don't take anything else from my class, please let it be the importance of voting, okay? Please let it be the importance of voting. Popular sovereignty, people power. The people hold power, okay? In the United States, for generations, different groups of people have fought and died for the right to vote, okay? People holding power is the key principle of American government, right? How does the Constitution start? What are the first words? Who wrote the Constitution? We, the people of the United States established this government, right? It's not the other way around. It's not the government giving rights to people. It's the people who have written this document, established this government for themselves, okay? Popular sovereignty. And we talked about that idea of the consent of the governed kind of goes along with this. What happens to a government if the people who have sovereignty, who have power, if the people decide that this government is no longer pleasing to them? What do? They throw it off and they come up with something new, okay? You know, sometimes through a political revolution, sometimes, hopefully, more often than not, through a peaceful means, right, of voting, okay? You know, how do we show if we don't like what the president's doing or the governor or a member of Congress? We have avenues available to us to throw them out, right? I've said this before to you guys. I'll say it again. Many people in elected office are good, honorable people, but a lot of them are counting on young people, especially, to kind of just forget about it. I'm not really, you know, I'm not. They're not paying attention anyhow. We can kind of get away with what we want because they're not going to come out and vote. Okay. Who is the most? We talked about this, right? Who is the most likely voter? An older person, right? If you can win older people, you're going to have a good shot in an election because older people do what? They get out and vote, okay? If you want a politician to care about what you think, you know, would we like to believe that politicians will care about what we think just because they're good people? Yes. But in the real world, that's not always the case. How do we make sure that a politician listens to us? We got to get it at the ballot box. Right? We got to get their attention at the ballot box, okay? If younger folks start to come out in bigger numbers, guess what? Politicians are going to start paying attention to issues that young people care about, whatever that is, okay? So popular sovereignty, the people hold power. Government only has power because the people have agreed to that, right? That whole consent of the governed idea, right? Power comes from the people. If the people decide that this government's not cutting it, the people have the right and the obligation to throw off that form of government and establish a new one, right? Thomas Jefferson would say that the tree of liberty must be fertilized from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants, okay? What does that mean? A little bit of conflict in our national dialogue is necessary and is needed. Now, do we want it to actually come to bloodshed? Certainly not. But the people hold the power. If the people no longer find the government to be legitimate, it's the people's responsibility and their right to get rid of that system that regime and come up with something else. Popular sovereignty, people power. Where does the government get its authority? It only has authority because the people say so. That is the key foundation of American government. Okay? Second thing, that government should be limited. Limited government. That's the second one. Limited government. How do we have a limited government? How do we make sure that the government doesn't get so enormous that it violates the rights of citizens? Well, what do we have? What can we point to? What can we say? Hey, you can't do that. It says so in the Constitution, right? We write down constitutions. What did we say a constitution is? It's like a big rule book, right? It's a rule book. Government, you may do these things. When you do these things, this is how you do it. These are things you may not do, okay? A constitution ensures that we have limited government, all right? So, when you ask the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Okay? Because the government is limited, that your ability to do something for a living is going to be based on your motivation, your intelligence, your willingness to work hard for it, right? The government isn't going to come in and say, "Oh no, you can't be a doctor. We need you to work in a factory," right? That's not how it works. Government doesn't get a say-so in that, okay? We talked about our rights in the Bill of Rights and in the other amendments. Things that if I want to talk about how much the government stinks, that's my right. The government is limited in its ability to curtail my free speech or my ability to worship how I want or not at all, or my ability to be secure in my privacy, or my ability not to testify against myself if I don't want to. We have all these protections written down in the Constitution. Excuse me. It is a limited government. Where the government can act, it should have power. We talked about how the Articles of Confederation, the government had very limited power everywhere. The Constitution says, yeah, government, in the places you're supposed to act, you should have some power. But in other places, who I marry, what I do for a living, where I live, do I have kids or not? How many kids do I have? On and on. Do I want to go to college? Do I want to, what do I want to do for a living? Where do I want to live? Do I want to take a trip somewhere? Okay? Those issues, the government has no power, or the government's power is extremely limited, right? If you decide that you want to do something, right? If you want to live in a particular place, if you can afford to live there, you can live there. If you decide you want to do a particular job, if you have the skills to do that job, you can do it, regardless of your race, your color, your ethnicity, your religion, your sexual orientation, your gender identity. Does not matter. The government cannot stop you from doing these things. The government's power is limited. Hey, government, right? We talk about those enumerated powers, those expressed powers, and those implied powers. You can do this stuff, government, but all these other things, mind your business. That doesn't mean the government can't do things to promote activities that it finds beneficial. It doesn't mean that the government has to be tiny, right? We're saying it's limited, right? The government's power is not absolute. It's not like in one of those absolute monarchies that we talked about. Say a country like Saudi Arabia, right? Where the king's will is pretty much done in any aspect that he or she, or well, if it's a king, a he, right? That they decide to enter into it, or a totalitarian system, say North Korea, right? Total control, right? Everything from how people dress, what kind of haircuts are okay, when people can leave their homes, okay? Government's power is limited, right? Cannot tell us what to do in any number of areas, all right? So people are in charge. Government's power isn't complete. It's limited by a constitution. Number 3, all right? Let's talk about separation of powers within the government, okay? This is one that we learned at the very beginning. How many branches of government are there? Three branches in the federal government, in the state government, in local, county, city governments, right? There's three branches, okay? The power of a government is not going to be given to one all-powerful group or one person. We're going to take power, we're going to split it up, okay? So that in order to get anything done, no one group can take over, can have the power to, make a law, enforce it, and then apply it or interpret it, right? We want it spread out. Another idea of early American political thought is diffusion, right? The spreading out of power. We don't trust it all in one place. Who had power all in one place? The King of England, right? And there was Parliament as well, of course, but the King of England was a pretty powerful monarch, right? We don't trust that. We don't like that idea. We don't like that system, all right? We want power spread out, okay? We want a lot of people to have a little bit of power instead of a little group of people having a lot of power. So what do? We take it and we make it into three branches. What are the three things governments have to do? They have to make laws, they have to enforce laws, and they have to interpret whether or not the law has been violated. Let's take all three of those and separate them out into different branches. Legislative branch, right? In the United States, that's the Congress. They make the laws, right? They look at problems. They hopefully consult experts. Hopefully they study an issue. They think of possible remedies. They debate it. And then they come, usually, hopefully, not always all the time now, but hopefully through a series of compromise and concession and consensus building, we come up with an idea to fix a problem, a law, all right, or a bill. We give that over to the president in the executive branch, and the president executes the law, carries it out, right? All right, here's we use the example of a football team or a volleyball team or a basketball team, right? The coach calls the play. That's what the legislative branch does. They call the play. Okay, if it's baseball, if it's softball, the coach says, "Hey, we're going to bunt here. All right, we're going to put a bunt down and we're going to get the runner into scoring position. All right." Then it's up to the player to execute. Okay, so the player gets the sign from the coach. All right. And now their job is to actually make that happen, right? They got to get the ball down with a bunt, all right? And they got to move the runner over, okay? They're the ones that have to go out and do it. The president gets the law, and then working with his or her cabinet and executive departments, they, say it's a law about environmental standards, right? Or say it's a law about we're in school. Say it's a law about teacher qualifications. They're going to give that to the person in their administration that deals with education, right? They're going to execute it. They're going to carry out the play that Congress called, all right? And then we've got the judicial branch. Who's the person, if we're going to use this sports analogy that we haven't talked about yet? The umpires and the referees, okay? So the umpire is going to decide whether it was a ball or a strike. The umpire is going to decide whether or not the batter got the ball down in play. They're going to decide whether people are safe or out, okay? That's what our courts do. That's what our judicial system does. They look at the plays that Congress has called. They look at the way the executive branch is running the play, and they decide whether or not it has violated any rules or whether citizens have violated rules, okay? Separation of powers. We don't want, think about if, you've heard the phrase, they're acting like they're judge, jury, and executioner, right? You can't be all those things, right? You can't make the law, then enforce the law, and then be the people that decide whether or not the law is okay. That's not the way it works, okay? Which leads us to our next issue or our next principle, checks and balances, right? All of those three separate branches, they need to be able to hold each other accountable. They have to be able to put a stop or a check, right? In basketball, when you talk about guarding someone, a lot of times they'll say, hey, who's going to check, Nobody can check LeBron James. What does that mean? Nobody can stop LeBron James, right? Each branch of government has to be able to check or stop or defend the other branches, okay? How do we do that? A few examples. The best example we can think of, Congress makes laws, right? Who has to sign it before it becomes a law? The president. The president can veto legislation. The president can say no. They can stamp it with the no, right? Congress then has the ability to look at that veto and override it, which means 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate disagree with the president and want it to become a law. It becomes a law. So do we see how that's checking? The president stops Congress. The Congress kind of checks the president back by overriding it. And then the courts look at those laws and decide through judicial review whether or not the law violates the Constitution, right? That's just one simple example. But courts can throw out executive action. Courts can throw out legislative action. So there's a check by the judicial branch on the executive and the legislature. The president appoints federal judges. That's a check the president has on the judicial branch. The president can veto legislation. That's a check the executive has over the legislative. The legislative branch confirms justices and federal judges. The legislative branch can override vetoes. The legislative branch conducts oversight of the rest of the government. Maybe the biggest one, and one that we had a little bit of experience with this year, Congress can impeach the president and remove him from office, right? Which we saw that earlier in the year, okay? So the last thing that we want to talk about as our fifth constitutional principle is federalism. Federalism, okay? And this current COVID-19, this coronavirus crisis has kind of shown us a little bit about federalism. Every day at 2 p.m., who comes and talks? Governor DeWine, right? There's certain things that the state government is taking care of. There's certain things the federal government is taking care of. What does federalism mean? We share power between a federal, national government and separate state governments and local governments as well. But federal government, United States government, shares power with the state governments of all 50 states, okay? Some things just the federal government does. We call those delegated powers. Those things that we want to go into as one nation, not as 50 separate states. So declaring war, right? When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, Ohio didn't declare war on Japan. Pennsylvania didn't declare war on Japan. Florida didn't declare war on Japan. The entire United States says all 50 of us, well, at that time, 48 of us, are going into this together, right? When we talk about money, right? We don't want Buckeye bucks and Keystone dollars, right, in Ohio and Pennsylvania. And then if you have Ohio money, you can't buy stuff in Pennsylvania. That's crazy. We have one US dollar for the entire country, right? Those are delegated. That's stuff that we only want one person running the show, right? We want one uniform policy throughout the country. Then we've got things that are going to be unique to each state. Driver's licenses, right? Do you think it's a little bit different driving in New York City versus driving in Montana? Yeah, so New York should be able to have different requirements to have a license than Montana, right? Same with all other kinds of licenses, teaching licenses, marriage licenses, a license to practice law, okay? Each state is going to be a little bit different about how they want to determine that, so they are the ones. Those are reserved to the states, right? Okay? You don't go, your driver's license says, you know, if you're in Ohio, it says the state of Ohio on it. Now we have these federal IDs now too, so this might be a bad example in a year or two, but it's issued by the state of Ohio. My teaching license, the first two letters of my teaching license number are OH, I think, right there. It says Ohio Department of Education, right? They are the ones that decide what they want in a teacher. If I were a lawyer, my law license, I'd be admitted to the Ohio State Bar, right? Those are controlled just by the state, okay? And then there's things that they both do, right? They both have to collect taxes. They both have to spend money. They both have to have court systems because they both make laws, right? So there's concurrent things too. Why do we do this? Okay, this was a compromise, right, between people that did not want a big, strong federal government. We protect some things just states do, right? We protect the power of individual state governments, okay? At the same time, we realize that there are some problems that have only a national solution. We're going to delegate those powers to the federal government, okay? And we'll have another assignment about federalism. You know, Mr. Drummond loves to talk about federalism, right? It's a complicated topic to understand, but it's all about sharing. It's the kindergarten principle, right? What do we learn to do in kindergarten? Share, among other things, right? The federal government does some stuff. The states also get to do some of their stuff, and some things they're both going to do, all right? Last thing I wanted to talk about before we end the video is this idea of the rule of law, okay? There's a saying that the United States is not a nation of men or women. It's a nation of laws. Rule of law means nobody is above the law. Whether you're the president of the United States, whether you are the poorest person born on the streets, and everybody in between, no one is above the law. The rule of law. Laws rule our country, okay? Not people. We must follow, every person must follow the law, okay? No matter how powerful they are, no matter how much influence they have, no matter how much money they have, in this country, the law should rule. The law must apply equally to everyone. No one is above it, okay? Does it always work that way? No, it doesn't. And many of these principles that we've just talked about, right? And I said at the beginning of the year, this is going to be examining government how it ought to be, how it was designed to work. Is it how it works right now? No, not always, okay? But in a democracy, in a nation of laws, the laws must rule. No person can put themselves above the law. A president, a principal, a teacher, a police officer, a citizen. The laws must apply equally to all people, or else they lose legitimacy, okay? The United States is a nation of laws, okay? Nobody gets out of obeying the laws. President Trump has to still enforce the laws that were passed by Barack Obama and passed by the Congress and signed into law by Barack Obama. Donald Trump cannot decide he does not want to enforce the law because he doesn't like it because Obama did it. Can he work with Congress to change the law? Certainly he can. But no person, we don't rewrite every law in the United States when we get a new president. We're a nation of laws. No one's above it. No one person can decide they're not going to obey it. No one person should be able to ignore the law. Okay? It should provide the same protection to everybody. Okay, so just a couple key principles, all right? If we kind of keep those principles at the center of our discussion of government, it'll help us understand a few of the things that get put into our Constitution, all right? How does this embody either popular sovereignty, checks and balances, federalism, separation of powers, limited government, or rule of law, right? We can start looking at that, and everything in the Constitution is going to embody one or more of those principles. All right, so hope you're having a good week. Hope you are taking care of yourselves, taking care of the people around you. Stay inside, stay home if it's at all possible. Let's ride this thing out, and we'll get back together soon. All right, talk at you later. See ya.